You're listening to the Literary Entrepreneur Podcast, Episode 8. Hello, welcome back to this edition of the Literary Entrepreneur Podcast. I am your host, Tara Moody, and this week we're going to continue to get a sneak peek inside the Launch Your Book Online webinar series that I just completed a few weeks ago. There is some really good information that I wanted to pull out and share with those who are podcast listeners. And if you like what you hear, I will definitely share how you can receive more information about the rest of the webinar series at the end of the podcast. So today I pulled about 10 minutes from the third webinar. The third webinar was 5 steps to a successful launch. And as I have stated in previous podcasts, if you're familiar with me from Tywebin Creations or Tywebin Publicity, I coordinate virtual book tours, Facebook chats, all kind of events for authors where they are releasing their book. And so what I did was I sat down and looked at my system, and I decided I was going to put all of this together for anyone who wanted to do kind of the DIY online publicity where you actually coordinated and put together your own event. And you might be wondering, well, why did you do that if this is something that you do under your company? And, you know, I'm also an author myself, so, and I understand, obviously, about doing things yourself. If you can do it and do it well and someone can teach you how to do it, you know, I much prefer you spending that time to really understand the process, to develop a relationship with people online via social networks, or whether they're bloggers or whatever platform you decide that you want to use to help promote your book. I'm definitely all for that. I'm a teacher at heart, and it was great for me to sit down and pull together my system for you if you're interested, take a peek behind what I do and to do it for yourself. So anyway, I'm going to talk about step 1 in this particular sneak peek, and if you want to hear the other 4 steps, I will definitely tell you how you can listen to those at the end of this podcast. Hello, welcome back to the Literary Entrepreneurs webinar series, Launch Your Book Online. I am your host and instructor today, Taora Moody, and today we are at part 3, and we're going to be talking about 5 steps for a successful launch. So let's jump right in. Just as a recap, if you're coming in right at part 3, there was a part 1, which was the 7 essentials for effective book marketing. Last week, part 2, we talked about 5 types of launch events. And today we're going to, hopefully, we'll go back to some of those launch events. And hopefully by the time you get to part 3, the goal was to have chosen a particular event that you wanted to try. So we're going to take you through the 5 steps on how you actually plan out that particular launch. And then next week, part 4, whenever you get a chance to see part 4, I'm going to show you some tools. We'll actually go inside those tools. I'll show you exactly what I do and how I use them. Just as a reminder, signing up for this course, you have a free download. You get to get the Literary Entrepreneurs Toolkit. You can download that. If you have any troubles, just give me an email or send me a message in the Facebook group that goes along with this webinar series. I have lots of good information that is outside of the webinar series, but it's definitely about book marketing, and that is the Literary Entrepreneur Podcast, which is on the 1st and 3rd Mondays. I'm currently working on the next podcast. I did 2 interviews the past 2 podcasts. I'm thinking I'm going to come with some really good information and do a blog post to go alongside it. So I'm really excited about that. Well, right now you're here, and we're going to go ahead and jump into the agenda for this particular webinar series, I do want to go back and recap the essentials we talked about in part 1, and then see, if you chose or a particular virtual event already. We'll go back through those again just in case you missed part 2. And then we'll go into the next step, which is the natural process. After you choose a virtual event, then you want to go into what are your ways of pulling this all together. So this looks like a smaller agenda compared to the other two, but there's just as many slides, because for this one I really want to jump more into the how-tos. I want you to see some samples and some tools, and some of these slides I wanted to squeeze in the graphic a bit, so I tried to put the URL so if you wanted to click off and see the actual page or the actual post, that you can do that later. So I will actually also include these links at the bottom of the resources area so that you can easily get to them. Alright, so hopefully by now you downloaded the survey that I had last week with part 2. Or maybe I shouldn't keep saying last week. You might have saw this yesterday or last night. But part 2, the whole goal was to kind of get you thinking about the type of event you wanted to do. So as I jump into number 1, this is you've already decided. You're already ready to go. If that's not the case, it's okay, but I wanted you to know that that's where this picks up at. Alright, so the first thing you want to do is prepare. So there's a couple of things you want to think about as you prepare your plan of action for your launch event or your virtual event. And that is the calendar. That seems pretty obvious, but you want to look for the best dates that are available for you. You saw this earlier. I went back over this from part 1. A mailing list provider is really important in this particular section because, some things you may do on social media, but there are other things you really want to have that email list already in place. And then forms. I do a lot of details in some of the events that I do, and I could not do them without forms. Forms help me pretty much recruit influencers. So, and I'll talk a little bit about those in just a minute. Alright, so let's get more into the calendar. And on the screen here, these are some events I've already done. I've done a couple of Facebook chats. I think I've done like 2 or 3 in the past couple of months. And so definitely you want to have in your arsenal some type of calendar. I love Google Calendar. I might have said this before, I don't know. It may not have been on this webinar series, but I know I probably mentioned it in the toolkit. But I like Google Calendar because you can log into it on any device and you can add and make changes and it syncs. So if you're on your computer, you get the same thing that you would see on your phone. You could probably also do the same thing if you're an Outlook person or I think iCalendar is what they use for Macs. So you definitely want to have a calendar that you're pretty comfortable with using, and that will kind of help you, especially when you're on the go and you want to make plans and you want to kind of see what's going on. Holidays and special events. This may play a role in how you decide when you're going to have your event. You may think it's cool to have your event, say, on New Year's or around Christmas time or around the holidays. If your particular book fits that, by all means, go for it. But maybe you want something more low-keyed during the year, so you definitely want to look to see what other themes are going on. I always use the example of looking at monthly themes. A lot of there are certain months of the year where there's special awareness things. Like I always go to October, where there is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, Domestic Violence Awareness Month. If you look for those type of themes and it's something that is related to your book, it might be a great idea to have your launch event around that particular theme. So definitely look at the calendar. Don't be so quick to jump in and just choose a date just because it seems to be open, but kind of strategically think about it. Alright, choose a mailing list provider. I talked about this really briefly in the first one, but I want to go back and talk about it a bit more. There are two main ones that I kind of recommend. There are others. There are lots of others. If you are really okay with spending money, Aweber seems to be a really popular one among internet marketers. It has a lot of features that you might need. I in particular think they have too many features. For me in particular, I like to use MailChimp. And I recommend MailChimp because it is free for like 2,000 emails. And those emails, I believe, from the length of time that I've been on there, they start over every month. So unless you have a certain number of people on your subscribers list, you can kind of keep MailChimp for a good while before you have to pay for the service. That is unless you get into doing things like autoresponders where you're more wanting to be more technical savvy with some of the features, then you might want to get into MailChimp. And even then, the monthly fee isn't as much as Aweber if you don't want to invest in that. The one thing about the mailing list that you want to keep in mind is, and I mentioned this earlier in part 1, you want to add a form to your website. Like when you get ready to do your launch event, hopefully you already have the form in place where people have been adding their emails. And you want to have it where you can reach out to those people who have already been added to your mailing list. Another thing is you might want to think about registration form. If you're doing, say, a blog tour or a radio tour, or even a webinar. A webinar is a little bit slightly different. I'll talk about that in just a second. But you definitely want some type of form where you can collect the information pretty easily without getting overwhelmed in your email. If you're trying to do everything just by your email, you want to rethink that.
I do hope you enjoyed that sneak peek into the 5 steps to a successful launch. That was the 3rd webinar in a 4-part webinar series called Launch Your Book Online. If you like to listen to more from that webinar, you can go to theliteraryentrepreneur.com/LYBO series. That's theliteraryentrepreneur.com/LYBO series. And you can take a look at the first 2, and also the 4th webinar is up as well. So I do hope that you are finding these little sneak peeks beneficial, even just for the first 10 minutes that you receive. I tried to power pack all of the webinars with information. If you do decide that you're interested, you will also be able to download the slides, the transcripts. You get a free copy of the Literary Entrepreneur's Toolkit, which is part 1 of the Toolkit series that I'm working on. And I do hope if you have any questions or if you still need a little bit of help with your book marketing, that you'll definitely seek me out. My name is Taora Moody, and you can visit me at theliteraryentrepreneur.com to see some other things that I offer. So I'm going to go ahead and close this out, and just as a reminder, I want to say to you, you are more than an author. You are a literary entrepreneur. Writing and marketing is a business, so let's learn how to tell the world about your book together.